Change is possible. This podcast will show you how. Bressie, can you tell me about the most challenging or one of the most challenging, difficult times in your life?
I've had a few. I break it up between being a teenager and whatever you want to call it, adulthood. But when I lived in the Middle East, my dad was in the UN and he was with the Irish Defence Forces. And we lived on the border, a place called Nahariya between Lebanon and Israel. And what is now referred to as the 9-day war started, not very long after we landed. I kind of blame myself. My anxiety was so profound, I blamed myself for a war. But and I just remember in the middle of the night being told to get into bomb shelters. And there were screaming bomb shelters and the sirens that you would hear. They're the most haunting sound in the world. And I just remember for the first time in my life feeling completely unsafe. And that was the kind of catalyst for pretty profoundly debilitating anxiety and panic attacks from my teenage years. And you can call that post-traumatic stress disorder, but I hate that label.
Yeah,
I would argue that it's a fairly healthy response to a war. That's exactly what I should be feeling. So I remember that time because I was hitting puberty as well. So I was like...
So how old were you?
13.
13.
And Kurt Cobain died as well. And all of that kind of kicked in at the same time. And I didn't know which way was up. And I remember thinking I had asthma because I couldn't breathe. I was fighting with breath all the time. And so that was really, the reason that was difficult is I didn't have the language to describe what was going on. So it was a very lonely experience. But then I think the next time, I think probably the most challenging was when I was playing professional rugby. And I was playing for Leinster at the time. And I was in a profoundly bad place. I was struggling with kind of debilitating depression at the time, couldn't get out of bed, wasn't washing, couldn't eat, had no appetite, which was really difficult to be a professional rugby player. Like you're trying to put on weight and body mass the whole time. And I couldn't, like, I always like Rodney from Only Fools and Horses. I was just like this guy who couldn't function. And I still had to get out of bed and I still had to play and I still had to go to training. And there were some days I always joked about having about 3,000 wisdom teeth. That was my go-to excuse for why I couldn't train. I was taking Xanax before matches. Once again, those two situations have a link. It was very lonely because you couldn't tell anybody what was going on. And that was a big driver of my work, is that Dr. Edith Eger has always said that expression is the opposite of depression. You can teach people how to express.
She's brilliant.
Yeah, and that language for young people to actually describe what's going on in their inner world, to make it less lonely. And when it becomes less lonely, it's a much easier thing to deal with. It's still pretty shit, but you can actually navigate it and express. So that to me would be the two experiences of, I suppose, pretty difficult, challenging times. And like most challenging times, you come through them. And when you come through them, you have something in your arse pocket for the next one that comes your way that makes you feel like you're able to cope better.
Yeah, I can relate so much to that story, Bressie, in terms of not the topography of it, just the biological output and psychological output. I had my own traumas, but it leaves an imprint on your mind and body. Like, it really changes you. But I know you're a big fan of Gabor Mate. I had the pleasure of interviewing him. He switched it back on me straight away. But what he says about what he said about my trauma, and this was mind blowing to me. I kind of knew it, but I didn't really know it. But he says it wasn't about the operation or the actual trauma. It was the being left alone, not telling anyone else about it. That was the greatest trauma.
Yeah.
So that sounds like
and
the
Dr.
same for
Eger
yourself,
says the same, like that you then become your own prisoner in your own mind. And she always said, I'll never let that happen to me again. I'll never be a prisoner in my own mind. I was a prisoner long enough in the concentration camps, where she was with her family. Yeah. And she said, I'll never be a prisoner in my own mind. And what she meant by that as well is like, yes, we've experienced, difficulty. My real difficulty was actually primary school. It was a very abusive place, very physically abusive, lots of beatings by the teachers and the Christian brothers. Like, I'll never forget that. That to me, never feeling safe in school. I remember being hit with a letter for nearly 3 minutes by one teacher, and I could smell alcohol off him. He was still drunk when he was beating me up and beating the guy. And that stuff never leaves you as a child.
Yeah.
But I do remember I've never used any of these things as a form of I've always taken responsibility for myself.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't mean that in a throwaway way. I've always understood that these things were difficult, but I've never actually used them as a protection thing. I've never turned it on anyone else, because I became so aware that, you know, through therapy, that you don't want to do that. You have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming over the hill to save you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so part of it was a big learning curve for me. But these times were, when I look back at the 80s in Ireland, you know, it was, you know, you might have had these quite abusive schools, and we had, you know, an awful lot of it. It was quite a poor place. But what was still in Ireland in the 80s and 90s was brilliant communities. We had great communities. People pulled together. Remember Italian 90? It was like nothing you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
These were communities, and I think we lose that now. And I think one of the biggest things we do know about mental health is that for good mental health outcomes, we need good communities. And I think this modern culture that we've created has eroded community. It's become less and less relevant. And we think we have a community because of the digital lives we have. But real community is different. Italian 90 was a good example of that.
Yeah. Deep. It's very shallow now, isn't it? The sense of community and connection, performative. Yeah.
It's like everything we do, we perform. It's like if we got to do something, we got to perform it. And Irving Goffman, the sociologist, wrote a book called The Presentation of Everyday Self. And he said that we have a presentation where we present ourselves to the world. That's our front stage. That's the stage. And then we have our backstage self. And that's us. That's really who we are. And the biggest paradox and overwhelm we have is when there's a huge disparity between those two. So your front stage self and your backstage self are two different people, and it doesn't weigh up in our heads, and it can be really jarring.
Friction.
So they always talk about if you can bring the two of them together and they honor each other, then people who do that find far more peace.
It's a freeing way to live when you're not putting on a mask and a face and they join. Yeah, I can really relate to that. So something you said really speaks to me as well. It's like the lessons that you learned through the hardship sort of helped you to navigate challenges today. So how do you navigate challenges today? How are you today in terms of anxiety and the challenges you had in the past and the work you've done?
I think people used to say to me, you've picked the worst industry to be in for somebody who has rampant anxiety, like performing or being an athlete. Actually, that's not true. Because when you're performing or you're playing sport, you can't think.
Yeah.
You have no time for the thinking. If you're thinking, you're getting your arse handed to you. Like you need to be on it. And it's thinking that it always kind of was the destructive part of my cognitive health. You give me time to think, I got to do something with those thoughts. And that's what I learned very quickly. But I also learned, there was one time with Dr. Tony Bates, you know, the eminent psychologist and probably the most important voice in mental health in Ireland, founder Jigsaw and Headstrong, and a very close friend and mentor and teacher and therapist in a way for me. And I told him all this stuff. I told him all the stuff I'd gone through, and he remember saying to me, you remember that teacher? He said, if he was sitting in front of you now, what would you say to him? And I'd be like, oh, you know, I wonder what happened to you that made you do this to me. And he went, Niall, your anger feels very reasonable. And what he meant was stop repressing that shit. Let it go. Let it out. And my dad used to always say I was too big to be angry. So I'd always this weird relationship with anger. And I always thought anger was a bad thing. And misguided anger is a bad thing. Righteous anger is a powerful thing. Like a release. So for me, what I've started to learn to do to get through these moments is I learn to observe my mind like it's independent of me. I observe my thoughts. I detach from my thoughts. I look at them in mindfulness, in insight. And mindfulness is insight meditation. It's not concentration meditation. It's not just focusing on the breath and, you know, trying to calm yourself down, Zen Buddhism. It's actually gaining insight, learning about how your mind works, how it doesn't work, what it likes to do in certain situations. That's the real power of mindfulness. It isn't about listening to whale music and burning incense. It's about watching your mind. And that's what I learned to do. And what you do then is you create self-awareness, which is a word that we see fecked around all the time. No one knows what it means. Self-awareness is knowing how you react to things. How do you respond to things? How do you deal with things? What energy do you bring into a room? And what energy does that room bring into you? That's self-awareness for me. And that's what I started to learn. So when you start hitting walls, and you do hit walls, you know, sometimes in the wellness industry, it's full of absolute foghorns of nonsense of like, they talk about what I call spiritual bypassing. Well, I meditate, so I don't have to deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
And then we've weaponized therapy speak. We've seen that in a massive way. People go, I'm not dealing with that. That's avoidance. And avoidance is the root of all disorder. So I don't avoid anymore. Even if it's nasty stuff, I go through it. Luckily enough in my life now, most of the stuff I go through is really lovely and positive and connected. But there's times it isn't. But I don't sidestep it. I don't use excuses for it. I walk straight through it. It ain't nice. It's uncomfortable. But I've walked through it before. So there's no reason I can't do it again.
I had a guy on the podcast recently. He's turned professional. He's only 23. Max Kennedy. He's brilliant. You'd love him, Bressie. But he says he looks at the undeniable facts of the past, and that gets rid of self-doubt. But it's like you're doing that as well. Like you're looking at the undeniable facts that you've gotten through, that you can get through it again in the future.
Yeah, but it's also all right to fall apart. Like this is the thing, is this idea of stoicism, and I see some of the stoicism on Instagram, and I'm like, guys, we need to give people space to fall apart and I don't mean, breakdowns. I'm just those days where you just don't have it in you. And, you have some lad on TikTok telling you he's done 2 days work before 6 a.m. and he's gone to the gym twice before 7 a.m. and he's injecting green stuff into his testicles now at 8 a.m. And if you're not doing it, you're not ambitious enough.
Yeah.
It's fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
I've had enough of it. That's individualism. What we've created is this deep level individualism, every person for themselves. And society and culture doesn't work that way. Always, through evolution, we worked as communities and groups. Like when we went out to get our dinner, we didn't go out as individuals or we would have been absolutely destroyed. We went out as groups and we worked as communities and we got our food and we fed our communities and we kept them together. It was tribal. We've lost that. It's just so individualistic. And I find that's the thing that gets me the most, is that I'm not an individual. Anytime I've got through in any of this stuff, I had people beside me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have got through without them. And they create the emotional scaffolding. And I'll be there for them too when the time comes. But it's also in your community. It's your local coffee shop. It's your milkman. It's your postman. It's your GAA club. It is, all of this is so essential to your mental well-being. And there's a really profound sociological theory by Emil Durkheim called the theory of suicide. And it was around back when the theory was kind of developed, was that Catholics had a lower suicide rate than the Calvinists or Protestants at the time, because the Protestants were very capitalistic, driven by entrepreneurship. They were driven by, success, and that was their thing. And, it is what it is. Whereas the Catholics were more driven by community and driven by being together, supporting each other, and not as much, this every man for themselves kind of mentality. And the theory was they had lower suicide rates because of the community spirit that was created. And there's times, though, like when I played rugby, I didn't want to be in a community. I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't feel comfortable in communities or groups, but there was 1 or 2 or 3 people that I did. And they were my community back then. And now I love community. I think it's everything, and I think we're losing it.
I couldn't agree more. And do you know the strange thing is, Bressie, I find like everyone is so busy these days. And last year, 2024, I kind of had a big year. And I remember saying to myself, I need to clone myself. And then all of a sudden I had a great opportunity with the TV documentary. So I was like, oh my God. And I pick a theme for each year. And 2024 was pulling back from work. It was the opposite of that. So 2025 was pulling back no matter what. And I've done that. I've pulled back from work. I've said no to certain things. But what I found was pulling back to give me the space to connect with me people and the people in my life, to have that community. That's what ties us all together. That's what life is about at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that self-awareness is understanding that, so what we've convinced people culturally, I see it in Ireland. I mean, I won't get into the politics of it yet. I will. But we've created this growth at all costs, this mentality. It's the only way we can be happy is if we keep growing the economy. When does that stop? In Buddhism, we call that the unquenchable thirst. That is a thirst you will never quench. It's in the individual. Somebody who becomes successful, then they're successful, then they want to become more successful, then they become really wealthy. Now they need to be wealthier than that guy. And it's this mentality. And we sell that as ambition, which is fine. Goal and purpose and ambition is really positive. Don't get me wrong here.
Yeah.
But we are selling it as that's the only thing that matters.
The premium
Our
thing.
economy has done it. Our government have had a hard-on for prosperity and growth. And I understand that because we've been a really poor country. But in that drive for growth, we have been utterly blinded to basic social human rights, basic stuff, like really basic stuff like homes, like health. And now what we're seeing is, I always say, in a health crisis, health companies had record profits. In an energy crisis, energy companies have record profits. In a housing crisis, housing companies have record profits. Can we start to see this doesn't work? It does not work. And no matter who's in power in this country, if we keep aligning to the same economic ideology of neoliberalism, we will never, ever solve this. We need to start again. And I mean, the reason this is important to the individual is because neoliberalism seeps into the individual. We talk to each other like we're companies. What's in this for me? We talk to each other like we're LinkedIn articles, Ireland Incorporated. And you know, when LinkedIn starts, it's like, I'm delighted to announce that the synergy between, and then we start talking to each other in pubs like that. So that neoliberal ideology seeps into our personalities, into our characteristics. And then we think I always joke that in the 90s, all my friends were in bands. Now they're all brands. Yeah. That's what we've done. We've turned each other into a marketplace.
Into a brand.
And that's why we feel lonely, I think, and disconnected. At a time when people go, well, why are people so overwhelmed? And in COVID, there was a flicker that we were getting that back. Yeah. And it was unbelievable. I remember at the start of it.
It was great, and we needed that pause. The pause opens up the space for that human connection.
And now we're trying to catch up with what we lost. Yeah. And that's what we have. We weren't allowed to process COVID. We weren't allowed to even think about it or talk about it. And I'm not talking about lamenting it. I'm like, oh man, that was mad. That was insane. And then what's happened as well, and this is really important to the human psychology. What COVID also did, and I think this is the real damage, is it's made people, all people, not just, people who might have conspiracy kind of mindsets, it's made people start to question governments and question how things are done. And question, like, who made the decision that we can have €8 meals in pubs? Like, it just feels like there was no protocol. And it was a completely different time. But I think what's happened is Gallup, who do the most incredible work around, wellness in terms of kind of like, not questionnaires, but surveys. Yeah. And they're incredible. Like, they're the global standard, has said that there's one of the biggest contributors to our wellness is democratic quality. We have to believe in our politicians. We have to believe in the democratic process. It's hugely important to wellness. We have to believe that our vote has potential to change things. And if that doesn't exist, it really influences how we feel about ourselves and our communities. And I think that's what's happened a little bit. But this all feeds into this idea that, we're not brands, we're humans, and we need each other. And we need each other now more than we've ever needed each other. And I think that's what we got to figure out how to do.
Yeah. And I want to come back to all that. There's so many important nuggets in there, because I think we tend to, with our language, we pull the world apart, like individualistic, collectivist. It all ties together at the end of the day. But the piece that you said, like, for me, self-awareness is the catalyst for change. I think that's the key. I love your definition of that. And it's like, even you talk with some influencers, like, it's easy to be self-aware when you're doing a yoga class or you're walking down the river, like, you can think about your thoughts and stuff like that. But it's having that self-awareness when things are really hard. And you've had an awful lot of challenges in your life. But one thing that what being friends with you for a couple of years now, Bressie, and what I've seen is you've created so many changes in your life, between Lust for Life, some of the work you do, being a musician, being a sports person, being a mental health advocate. Now you're doing a PhD and you're doing that work around that. What is the key? A community is obviously a huge part of that, as you spoke about. What is the key for you around creating that positive change?
The first thing is understanding that happiness is not driven by achievement. That is an absolute kind of complete anomaly that I convinced myself of, that the cracks that I had in me would only be solved if I achieved more things. And the more I achieved, the bigger those cracks became.
Yeah.
And because I thought that would be the thing that solves it.
Make you happy.
And it was never that, because I wouldn't let myself be proud. I wouldn't let myself accept the achievement. I would just move on. I would take it for granted. And that was not good. And I did everything generally for everybody else, because I thought that was the thing. And when we were growing up, was either be a priest, work in a bank, or that they were the big jobs. I used to tell my granny I was going to be a But the point being is, I don't believe your happiness lies in achievement. I believe it lies in connection. So that doesn't mean you don't achieve things.
Yeah.
Actually, when I figured that out, the things I wanted to achieve started to happen, which was weird because I started letting go of the need to control everything all the time. That was really important. Letting go of the idea that if this doesn't work out, I'm a complete car crash. I didn't care anymore. So I started taking on things that I would have ran a mile from in the past because if it didn't work out, I'd look like a fool. And then the other thing I did was I aligned two things. What are my value system? That was really important. People talk about that, but don't Google your value system. Really get in on it.
That's deep reflective work.
It's a fairly funny uncovering because like all the stuff you think was your value system isn't. And one of the top of my value system, like top in bold, is family. That's it. Every decision I make has that at the core. If it influences my family or brings my family together or supports my family, then the decision is easier for me to make.
Would you put health above that? Because family and health are two of mine, but I think I have to put health first because then it gives me the energy and the health to be able to. It's a funny one, you know.
Yeah, no, I get that too. I think I would bring health into the far more kind of the personal responsibility thing. You know, we all want to take responsibility for ourselves and look after ourselves. I think for me with the family, it's just more of like they mean everything to me. And I started to realize like the stuff that I was doing that I thought was making them happy wasn't because they knew I wasn't happy. So there, all of a sudden now my value system's starting to change. Then when I looked at, say, Lust for Life and set up the charity, I looked at, I never wanted to be a problem admiration society. I don't want to be that guy who sits in a pub bitching about and giving out about everything. None of that lad, because that's what social media is now.
Yeah.
That guy you never wanted to sit beside in the pub because even the positive things became cynical.
Yeah.
I find that really difficult. So I said, like, how do we solve this? What would have helped me? That's how I set up Lust for Life. What would have helped me was early prevention. That's what would have really helped me. It would have been at 13 years of age, pulling me aside, helping me through what I was going on in my head. That would have been massively beneficial. So it's like, that was my motivation. What would have helped me, the child within? And that's why we set up Lust for Life with Paula and Colin. And then all the other stuff is just stuff I enjoy. But the one thing I learned this year, I think is more important. You named all that stuff. I was lost in the midst of it all. I lost myself a little bit. I lost myself because I believed that my role now had changed to providing solutions for everybody else and not for myself. And what I mean by that is I'm a musician. That's everything to me. I always say sport is what I did, music is what I am.
Right.
It's a different thing. Writing, composing, it is my way of expressing what I can't express. And it's really important to me. And not just performing or writing, being in a studio, creating things. And I lost that in myself. I lost a huge part of myself because I wasn't doing it anymore. And I made the decision about 3 years ago, that I need to get that back. And I need to be a musician again. And that's my purpose, just for myself. And that's what I did. And then I kind of wrote a kind of classical album. My background's I'm a piano player. My mum's a piano teacher. And I was really nervous about that. I was like, oh my God, people think, God, what's this guy know about the piano? All of that, all the stuff you talk about and all the stuff I talk about in terms of, you know, believing you're not able for, you're not good enough, imposter syndrome and all that. Yeah, you carry that all, but you have the self-awareness to respond to that and go, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
That's how I respond to it. So that to me, it's losing yourself. You don't want to lose yourself. And in the midst of all that, I also believed that exercise would solve all my problems. And it got more and more extreme until one day, this is a good example of it. I started doing Ironman. I was like, that will solve all my problems. Let's just run and cycle further and further and further. And really all I was doing was running away. And I did the Copenhagen Ironman. And I remember my mother at the finish line, and I could see it in her, and she looked at me and says, please never do this again. Like, I'm so proud of you, but I don't know if this is the answer for you. And I was in the person, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to get a better time. The next morning I sold both my bikes. I sold them because I realized that where I was going. And I think exercise is one of the most important things we do. But when it becomes obsessive and it just becomes a smokescreen to run away rather than to run towards, I didn't want that to happen again.
What gave you that awareness? Was it your man? Did you back to community? Did you need family? Did you?
My value system.
Yeah.
Once again back.
Yeah.
My mother, she was so proud of it. And I remember just thinking, she just saw, like, I'm 17 stone. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'6", and I was 14 stone doing the Ironman.
Whoa.
I'm skin and bone.
Wow.
I was getting into this mindset of going, I'm going to go again.
Like
I'm going to buy another bike. And these are really positive things. People are going to watch this. Well, I do triathlon. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm saying don't do them thinking that will solve the problems
Mm.
that you're not able to deal with in your head. You got to deal with the thing. You got to work through it. You got to understand. And exercise is a really great way of kind of offsetting overwhelm and stress. And I'd be lost without it. I love it. I love
Yeah, I'm the
exercise.
same.
I love it. And I love being outside and I love it. I do all these things. But they never solved my problems. My problems were deeper than that. And I think what solved my problems was really pretty long and challenging therapy, going through it, uncovering it, mindfulness, self-awareness, and letting myself fall apart. And as I said, people listening to this will go, he's talking about, not being driven. I'm not. You see, that's what modern culture has convinced you of.
Mm.
It's convinced you of people coming on podcasts like this with emotional music in the background, where guides who really don't know anything about your life are telling you how to fix your problems. And I don't do that. And I think that's the point. We've convinced people that the only possible way that we can solve these cracks is by doing more, doing bigger. And then people go, well, I want to do that. It's like, brilliant. One thing I'll tell you, once you start living the other side of your life, your connection, your family, your loved ones, these things fall into place. And they fall into place without the overwhelm. You lived it, I lived it. It's not a lecture. I haven't figured this shit out. Anyone who comes on the podcast and tells you have, they're not telling you the truth.
It's ongoing. Yeah. It's ongoing. It's really. I read a book one time. I think it was The Road to Character was the name of the book, and it talked about values in terms of resume values and eulogy values.
Yeah.
And the resume values, they're important, but ambition, drive, tenacity. But the eulogy values, what would you want your loved ones to say about you at your own funeral?
That's great, but yeah.
It's empathy, loyalty, connection, thoughtful. When I see people being
and a bit of
extra,
crack as well.
I think a bit of fun.
You keep forgetting about that.
Yeah, a bit of fun, playfulness. Yeah,
mischievous.
Don't take yourself too seriously. Boldness is one of my
boldness.
core.
Love it.
I love boldness as a value. And it's spontaneity. You need all a bit of that.
That's a great way of looking at it, and it is that. Like, I also think that the thing that in the midst of all of that, another value system I have that's just below it is discipline. And people go, does that mean you want to? No, the discipline is also to know when not to do things.
Yeah.
It's when to sit in your hoop and eat Pringles. It's when to go, the discipline here is to rest. The discipline now is to spend 2 days with my family and not look at the world. The discipline now is I got to train because I have an event coming up. The discipline now is I have a PhD, so I got to focus on that. The discipline is applying the things in that moment that you need to do. Discipline is not pushing. It's about knowing where to push and when to do it. And it's about, that to me is what discipline is. And you look at any of the world-class athletes that we all admire and look up to, Olympic athletes, rugby players, Lions, like the Lions, you're watching the Lions tour, they'll finish, they'll all absolutely do nothing for 2 months. They will eat, drink, party, rest. They won't be training. And same Olympic athletes, people, this is my favorite line, is on LinkedIn, people talk about optimization and optimal. Humans are not designed to be optimal all the time. We're designed to be optimal for short periods of time. Olympic athletes, they're optimal for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They build, and then they do nothing. And they just, boom, they fall. And, Daniel Wiffen went to Thailand and partied after winning gold medals for a few months. Rightly so. That's what you do. But we're convincing people like me and you who aren't athletes that we got to be optimal all the time. And it's a nonsense.
Yeah.
You got to sit in your hole and do nothing from time to time and rest.
Oh, we try to, I think language sometimes gets in the way, and all of these absolutes, you've got to take everything in context. Everything's contextual and everything's time bound. It's always a lot more complicated. So if anyone thinks they absolutely have the solution to on Instagram or something like that, the absolutely have not. That probably is the only absolute that's out there.
It's true. The objective, there's the objective without knowing anything about the individual.
Yeah.
And I think what I do love about social media, I get brilliant advice on it, and there are generally very well intentioned people doing great things, but it's too simple, it's too reductionist to go, do you want to live a life that's calm? You're like, what the fuck do you know? You have no idea what I'm carrying, and you have no idea how I respond to stress or why. And it's just this absolute sweeping statement. And the joke I always make is that it's inspirational Facebook pages, and genuinely, I would. The kind of averages, I'd understand maybe 20% of them. And they look lovely. They're lovely pictures. And the sea looks nice and the quote looks lovely and it's warm. But it's too simple. It's too simple. It might help somebody in a moment. But I think really when you break it down, and there was that Facebook page that your man put up on the Facebook page that we only have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky every time. And people were like, that's beautiful. That's so profound. That was a death threat by the IRA to Margaret Thatcher after the Brighton bombings. I always say we're so desperate for people to tell us everything is okay that we're believing death threats by the IRA. And what I'm trying to say to people now, ultimately this is what I'm getting to say to people. If you're still standing after the complete shit show that's been served our way consistently for 10 years, just a perma crisis, austerity, recessions, cost of living crisis, global pandemics, wars that have shattered our hearts, that we feel so helpless in the midst of it all. If you're still standing, you don't need to be more resilient. You are it.
Give yourself
That's
a pat
it.
in the back.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. There's nothing bigger than that. And anything bigger than that's avoidance. Like, so if you're getting kids to school and you're getting through your day, and then you have someone telling you that they've saved the world that day, it doesn't mean you have to. And it means that's the thing. That to me is really why I think it's important people understand. It's the Winnie the Pooh, the Tao of Pooh, the most important psychologist in the world.
It's brilliant.
You're stronger than you realise.
Yeah.
You know, you really are. And I think that's all I know. And that doesn't mean the strongest thing sometimes is actually to fall apart and say you can't carry this.
Ask for help.
That's so important.
What would you, because I want to move on to the sort of the world change stuff and the work that you're doing there, Bressie, but what advice?
Buckle in.
Buckle in, yeah. What advice, and I know like these quick tips are dangerous, but like something that I have done myself, I've really deeply reflected on my values. And it was funny, I was doing a bit of work yesterday, and it was these two young interns, I think they were from Thailand, working in one of the banks, and they were so thoughtful, naturally thoughtful. And I pointed something at me. I said, I was so impressed by their thoughtfulness. And I was saying, oh, that's something I want. That shined a light on something I value, because I was impressed by these young people being very, very thoughtful. What advice would you give people to think about their values so they can align and sort of make changes in a direction that will align with who they are, their true self?
In MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is, you know, what I teach, there is a moment, I think, in week 4 where you ask the person, what are the attitudes of a good friend? You ask them the question. And then they start lining up things like honesty, loyalty, fun. This is what I expect of a good friend, compassion. I'm like, cool, no problem. And then you turn the question and go, how many of them do you offer to yourself? And they very quickly realize not many. And I always say, like, if a friend of yours broke up with somebody, or, you know, their marriage broke down, you wouldn't go up to them and go, cap shite, he deserves that. You say that to yourself, though. Yeah. You do to yourself like a punch bag. And I think that self-awareness is understanding this is what I expect from the people I love when I need them. So when you know, I'm going through a shit show, what do I need? How do I talk to myself? And that's really important. And you know, that doesn't mean that you let yourself off the hook when you do stupid things. You that's discipline again. No, actually, that wasn't good enough, Niall. You didn't actually talk to that person right. And the one thing I've learned in this world is that people generally are very sound if you come back to them and go, I was way out of line there. And it's sincere and it's authentic and it's honest. I absolutely,
it's real.
You did not deserve that. And there's I think it was Albert Marabi, the psychologist, did a research that said about 7% of meaning when we speak to each other is assigned to words. 93% is assigned to language and tone of voice. And what that means is you can't bullshit people.
Yeah, we feel it.
You can't bullshit people. So if you're turning up and you're not being honest or authentic, you can say all the words you want.
Yeah.
Rumi said words can bring you to the door, but they can't bring you into the house. That's what you got to do. You got to show up and you got to be honest and authentic in a world that's full of horse shit, and that's lost that. The people with superpowers, the people who refuse to lose that, even when it's difficult for other people. And that to me is the radical act of being kind. And we've created a modern culture where it's a radical act to be kind. We have people like Musk who's soulless, lost, nothing in. There's no heart. There's nothing in that man. There is nothing there. He said that the biggest flaw of European society is empathy.
The biggest flaw, he said
the biggest
that.
flaw we have. These are the billionaires. I'm sick of billionaires telling us what to feel and not what to feel. I'll tell you one thing, you lose that, it's a very empty world. No money, no assets, nothing. And you can see it in them. Nothing will fix that gap. If you lose empathy, if you lose that kindness that you talk of, and you just lose that simpleness of being a human being, you'll think then somebody who owns 400 billion euro who doesn't have empathy or kindness, you think that could be fixed? I'd rather genuinely stay where I am and keep that value And that's it for me. I think it's everything. And empathy shows up in different ways. It doesn't have to be performative. I don't need to see your empathy. You don't need to film it and put it online for me. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Stop. Like, and people, it's nice to see nice things, but like, they're your personal moments.
Yeah.
They're what make life worthwhile. I don't need to see them. They're for you and your family.
Imagine having a sponsor whose only interest is creating positive ripples of change around the world. I first met Jacqueline and David Coyne from the Coyne Foundation when they introduced me to Dr. Gabor Mate in 2024, an incredible pinch myself moment in my own life. Over the next few episodes, we'll be sharing weekly challenges inspired by their work and ethos. Small actions create big ripples. This week's ask is called The Compliment. Offer someone you know a genuine compliment. It could be anything. I love how hard you work with the kids. I love how you take care of your parents. You've got great energy today. Offer them a compliment, anything at all. Pay it forward.
It's funny, I've been getting very, I just don't really post much anymore, and I find it quite difficult to post stuff, and it's that signposting thing as well. It's really, I find social media quite challenging because it's so useful. Yeah, at the same time, it just has this veil of fakeness around it as well. But then you need it in the world, especially if you have a business yourself these days. It's a difficult. How do you deal with that actually?
Social media. So the currency of social media is division. It doesn't work without it. That's how it works. So there's one thing, if you understand it. Some of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life have been on social media. I've learned to do things I couldn't do on social media. I learned how to do proper pizza last night. And I know that sounds simple, but it was so easy to do it. I enjoyed it, and it was good music, and the guy was lovely. You know, we create the idea of social media, and it is the big bad wolf. I would not let children near it.
No.
That's, we know now with Jonathan Haidt's data and research.
Yeah.
It's undeniable social psychology. You can't deny it, and that's why we're seeing policy change because of it. But as you, as an individual watching this, one great way to get through social media without feeling like you're drowning is just don't look at the comments. Not just the comments in your thing. Any comments.
Any comments.
Any comments. That's where the cesspit is.
I
The
know
other
s-
stuff is just clickbait. It's fine.
Yeah,
They'll keep doing that. Just do not look at the comments.
I know some people that just look at the comments. That's their thing.
It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
And that's the negativity bias. We convince ourselves that that's what's going to make us happy or make us think, well, that person's in a lot more shit than I am, so I'm doing all right. If you want to do that, just watch horror movies. Like, I think social media I have a pretty decent relationship with it.
Yeah, I've gotten better.
I'm pretty good with it. I need it. It is part of our modern culture. I don't believe in censorship. I don't believe in
The
banning
genie's
things.
out of the bottle.
Yeah,
That's the reality.
We've convinced, but I think a lot of people who have young children, I will say to them, I'd be less worried for really young children now because we know now not what to do. Whereas as teenagers, I'd have a bit more concern for because they got it right on, they got it right in the chest where they were like, whoa, and COVID and everything that came with that, and we have a real duty of care to make sure they're okay. And I'm not sure we're doing that because all we do is label them.
Yeah.
It's Gen Z. I don't even know what generations are anymore.
Yeah.
As if the world's not divided enough.
Yeah, it's that divide. It's that in-group, out-group divide.
Individualism, dude.
Yeah.
It's
We're all
it's good for
humans,
marketing
we're all
and
a
politics.
community.
It's terrible for community.
It's that language. I find just language gets in the way. We chop up the world with our words and our language, and it just gets in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's as I said, back to that Albert Mott, words can bring you to the door, but they can't bring you to the house.
I've never heard that. I love that. I'll use that going forward. This brings us nicely, Bressie, to the work you're doing. And I'm fascinated. Like the name of the podcast, again, is Change is Possible. But is change possible at a global level or a societal level?
So anyone who's a fan of Malcolm Gladwell and might have read his book, Tipping Point, will understand how change can happen and how it can't happen and what are the obstacles for change. Change is a great word for opposition politicians and election time. Most of them have no idea how it works or why it isn't working or why we're still in a position where we're watching dysfunction in our housing systems and our health systems, and it seems unsolvable. That's the biggest dilemma. And I don't think politicians aren't trying to solve it. I think they're generally blind to the reasons why it's happening. And one of those things is a brilliant essay by Mark Fisher called The Privatization of Stress. And Mark Fisher was a cultural theorist, but he was unbelievable. He talked about neoliberalism and understanding what this is. Neoliberalism is free market capitalism. It's basically no regulation. It's let the market fix all problems, essentially. And Margaret Thatcher and Reagan were the godfathers and godmothers of it. They believed that growth at all costs, the economy at all costs. If you were depressed, it was because you were lazy. That was their mindset. And that started in the 80s. And he said, Mark Fisher said in that essay that neoliberalism has hit the ultimate goal of any ideology, invisibility. You can't see it. You don't know what it is. You don't understand what it is. And back to the idea, what it means in Ireland is we're looking at a housing crisis. Just take, for example, before we even get into health, we're looking at a housing crisis that does not seem solvable. Yes, there are issues. We've had huge issues with kind of supply chains and COVID, really difficult stuff. But the basis of it is that we have always seen, since we've embraced neoliberalism, which is kind of the 90s, as housing was never a human right. So we can't understand, if people don't have a house, it's because they didn't work hard enough. Or that's the mindset. That's the mindset we've created. It completely erases inequality and inequity. It pretends it doesn't exist. And we saw that when Leo Varadkar talked about the social welfare, lie on your neighbour kind of thing, why there was such a response to that. So neoliberalism's the rot that does not allow change. And in my PhD, I'm looking at mental health and health, essentially. Why are we looking at this issue that doesn't seem to be solved? And it's called path dependency theory. And path dependency theory originally came from economics, and it was the idea that, do you remember the QWERTY keyboard, the keyboards that we use?
Yeah.
When you look at that, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's the stupidest looking thing you've ever seen. And the reason it was designed is because journalists used to write on the typewriters, and if it was A, B, C, D, the word that gets stuck together. So they created this QWERTY keyboard, so the words were a bit more spread apart when they were typing. And then technology capped onto it, and then it started rolling, and then it just got so far that we could never change it.
Couldn't change it.
So that's the QWERTY keyboard.
Right, that's
why the Mac took it on and Intel took it on, and all of a sudden this is the stupid yoke we're using. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same with what's happened in health. We start down a path, and then it becomes more and more difficult to deviate off that path with each step we take. Health is a prime example of that. So we opened the asylums in Ireland. By 1950, we had the highest level of people in psychiatric confinement in the world. We just kept putting 22 massive asylums in Ireland. We kept throwing people into them. We put money into them. We put training into them. And every step we took, every time we put more money into it, it became more and more difficult to move off it. So one of the biggest reasons for that is bureaucracy. Max Weber calls it the iron cage of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy was developed to create efficiency, and now it's done the opposite. You can't get anything done because it's become too efficient. And that's the iron cage of bureaucracy.
It's become too efficient.
Too regulated, too efficient. When you go to somebody and goes, well, you're going to have to go to that person, and I can't make a decision on that. I can't do that. That's our health system. It's bureaucratic. It's inertia.
Layered.
And then everyone goes, I couldn't be arsed. This is too difficult. And then what happens is we have a really ineffective suboptimal system because of deep levels of bureaucracy, and nothing can get changed. I'm experiencing it now in a very real time in a certain regard with a project I'm working on, and I'm seeing it in real time. These are brilliant people who have the capacity to do brilliant things that can't do them because of these deeply bureaucratic systems that we've created. And there's a brilliant book by George Richard called The McDonaldization of Society. So we've McDonaldized society. We treat our health system like we would McDonald's, make it more efficient. We need to be able to keep everything predictable. Like we do at McDonald's, you always get the same burger, no matter what. You always get the same fries, no matter where you are in the world. That's the McDonaldization. We've done that to health systems. We've done that to housing systems. And we have created this in the wealthiest country in Europe, this deeply dysfunctional health system, this deeply dysfunctional housing system. And no one's asking why. It's because we signed up to an ideology that does not work. Neoliberalism is the greatest rot. It has rotted our society and our culture. And the only way we can change things, I believe, is if we turn our back on that ideology altogether. Now, people love to throw at me that I'm a communist now or a socialist because I say that. I'm not I'm a democratic socialist. Democratic. That's kind of the Nordic, the social democrat is what I would be. The Nordic.
Could you describe that a little bit more?
So social democracy is still a form of capitalism.
Yeah.
But it's a form of capitalism that still honours innovation and entrepreneurship, and it's still people who drive or are successful, they celebrate them, but everybody gets a pot.
It looks after
everybody gets a shot. A good way to describe social democracy is the Finnish Prime Minister was talking to Dr. Mike Ryan from the World Health Organization when he was talking about basic universal income. And he said, why do you do that? And you know what his answer was? He said the most dangerous person in any society is a person with nothing left to lose.
Yeah.
So we make sure people have stuff to lose. And in Ireland, we've thousands and thousands and thousands of people with no home.
No food.
No food, no understanding in a wealthy country. And they have nothing left to lose now.
Mhm.
They've been kind of... And that, to me, there's another thing in economics called the third way, which is kind of quite similar to social democracies. But people then... I said this the other day on LinkedIn, and somebody argued, that's socialism. I was like, it's not socialism. And there are elements of socialism, but there's also elements of capitalism. I believe profoundly and respect innovation and entrepreneurship. People who've done amazing things and are successful. I have so much respect for them because I know probably the level of work they had to do to get there.
Yeah.
But I think everybody should get a pot at that.
Yeah.
I think everybody has a right to high-level education. It shouldn't be an inequality issue. And that's the difference. I also think a social democracy, you look at things like my dad, who was in the army, he had 5 children. My mum was a stay-at-home mother. My dad certainly wasn't on army wages weren't particularly good.
Yeah.
And he brought up 5 children and bought a house in Mullingar. How did he do that? How in the name of God was he able to do that? He worked hard. He went overseas a lot, but he still did it. He fed us, and we were absolute monsters. I was eating them out of house.
Imagine.
He was able to do it.
Yeah.
You know why? Because we didn't have houses for 800,000 in Mullingar. You didn't have that. Everybody had a chance. People who had a job and maybe had to say were able to get houses. I was born in Blanchardstown. That's where I was born. I lived in Blanchardstown when I was 3 and moved to Mullingar. But my parents had a chance, and what that does is gives you hope, and hope is everything. You lose hope, that's the thing. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, it's hope.
Yeah.
You keep eroding hope from people. They're working their hose off, and they're going, I can't get a house. I can't provide for my children. It breaks anybody. And then we tell them they have a broken brain. And this is what happens. We've convinced people it's their brains rather than going, well, actually, I think it's society and I think we got to solve it. And the way to solve it and to change it for me is to change our ideology.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of addiction. I've never thought about it this way, but like the choice theory of addiction, you're weak. You're weak morally and you chose to take the drugs. But then they went to the biological model, but it's not biological. There's an element of that, but it's a sociological, it's an environmental issue. So addiction's the same. Like, and I think I wrote a blog one time, like we're all given a hand in life. It's how you deal the cards. Yeah, and I'm nearly embarrassed with some of the blogs I written in the past.
No, I've done it too.
Yeah, we've all done
completely.
it. But it's having that lens of looking at it. Yeah, you probably have got a hand you can play with, but if someone can give you an ace or a joker on the side and help you and lift you on the way, that's what it's got to be. People that have those privileges, and I nearly hate the word privilege because it's thrown around too much sometimes, but people that have
weaponized.
It's weaponized, yeah. People that have other opportunities in life, if they can understand that if they were in the position of somebody else, they wouldn't be where they are. That's the reality.
And I think this is really important because in my research on... my research seems grim and difficult when you're looking at psychiatric interventions and mental health interventions over the last 200 years.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty grim, but actually it's teaching me an awful lot more that I never have learned. And one of the things it's taught me is we've always tried to solve social problems with medical solutions. That's what we've always done, and we're still doing it. We're seeing Gavin Newsom, the great governor of California, who potentially might be the next Democratic candidate for presidency, talking about potentially opening asylums again or institutions because of the homelessness issue and addiction problems in San Francisco and LA. He's completely blind to the fact that a lot of people are living on the streets because they've made them unlivable cities. Yeah. That it's $4,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. Who, in the name of God, who's born and bred in San Francisco, who's not a tech worker or has a $200,000 a year job, can afford that? And then all of a sudden they find themselves losing purpose, losing hope, maybe falling into drug addiction, and then who knows it, maybe fentanyl, and now they're on the street. And now we said the only way to solve that problem, let's put them into asylums. But we only put them into asylums because we don't want to see it. We don't want to see the impact of these social decisions. So we hide them, and we've always done that. That's what the asylums ended up becoming, a dumping ground for the stuff that society did not want to see. And these are the realities of where we're at. So change for me requires a lot. It requires political leadership, which I don't see. I honestly think Niall Martin's a good guy. I think he seems like a decent gentleman. I've met him once or twice. So I'm certainly not a cheerleader for our governments. But I think unless they realise I interviewed Pascal Donoghue for the podcast, nearly jumped off the seat when I called Ireland a neoliberal state. He goes, but we've got good social welfare system. I said, that doesn't mean you're not neoliberal. Like, you have that, but then you have massive investment portfolios coming in and just sweeping up housing in places where people need to live and making it impossible. And then what happens? This is where it's really important. What happens to that mother? Like, if you paint this picture, say the mother, 2 kids, and maybe single mother, and she's 2 kids, and she can't get at home, and she's living with her mum, who's has a small house, and she's lucky enough to live with her mum, and then she tries to get rent, can't get rent, can't work because she has to take care of the kids. Then she's starting, she can't even go out because she has no disposable income. And then every day she's seeing how wealthy Ireland is and how well we're doing and how great it is, and aren't we the great with our GDP and all this stuff. And she's thinking, I'm doing something wrong here. I'm not good enough. And then all of a sudden her self-worth starts to erode. She starts to feel like she's not good enough, worthless. She's not a good enough parent. Then hope starts to erode. And then she goes to the doctor, and they went, you have a chemical imbalance in your brain. And this is the point. If we keep doing that to people, the best way to start making people better and well is to create societies that make them feel well and make them feel connected and make them feel, that's what communities are. And Ireland, I believes in fairness. I think it's the best psyche. I think it's the best part of our psyche. When you break us all down, I think because of our history, we believe in things should be fair. And people then go, well, people will might take a house and 99% won't. They'll value it. They'll support. They'll be very appreciative that society stood out and looked after them. And this is the line I always use. I have a degree in economics. I get how this works. I'm not a romantic ideologue who goes, we should just make everything. I get a system needs money. I get it.
Yeah.
But the problem is, economics is and always will be a very blunt instrument on how to judge a society. Judge a society on how it treats its most vulnerable. And ask yourself, are we doing a good enough job? That's it. And that to me is what we got to look at.
That's the essence of it right there, isn't it? How do you treat your most vulnerable? And I think like this idea of a meritocracy, like you get what you deserve, you need that. There needs to be incentives for people to move on, but you've just front and foremost, how do you treat the most vulnerable people in society?
Well, how do you change your mindset of them? See, the problem is the Maggie Thatcher, Reagan mindset of the vulnerable people is that they were lazy, that they didn't work hard enough, that they somehow were lesser than. And that seeps into society, seeps into people. I have friends who have got good jobs who actually think like that.
Yeah.
And none of them ask the question. like genuine, I feel very lucky. Like, I came from Mullingar, 5 kids. I said, like, I remember the 80s, like you couldn't have everything you wanted. You just didn't. Like, it just wasn't the way it was. But I do remember feeling love and safety and having a home. And I just wonder, wow, what in the name of God would happen to me if I didn't have that? With everything else that happened. How would I survive that? And then I have other, friends who come from, vicious circles of poverty. For whatever reason, their dad might have had a drink problem and wasn't working, and then someone goes, well, he did okay for himself. That's not how it works. Yeah. It's a silly...
Looking at the outliers, looking at the 1%.
That's the Maggie Thatcher mindset. So we got to change that. And I think Emma Kirwan's piece, I think it'll go down in history on the Late Late Show. I think if you want to study sociology, listen to every word of that it wasn't, men in tracksuits who ruined the economy. It was men in suits.
Yeah. Where can people watch
It's on the Late Late Show. It's on YouTube. It's a very powerful quote.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And he's so articulate. He's so intelligent. And he's probably the person establishments fear the most, because it is kind of putting this out there. And this is the important thing, Brian. The reason change is not happening at a political level is because of that mindset that we believe, and that's why the things like when Leo Varadkar said what he said about social welfare, that infuriated people, because we had just come out of austerity. So the very people who had nothing to do with the crash was driven by banking regulation. No banking regulation. It was driven by greed at the very top 1%, and not one of them were punished for it. And my family, your family, everyone, we were punished. We were the austerity, and we're still paying that back.
Yeah.
And we gave, the IMF came to Dublin, and we gave them Mikado biscuits and tea, and we sat them down and go, we'll sign whatever you want, not knowing what it would do. And I still think Ireland's an incredible country. Look at what we do well. We can do it. We're good at change.
And as a people,
We're good,
great.
but even as a government, I think we can do it. But we got to stop signing up to this. So change, I don't believe, is possible if we continue down this road of growth at all costs. The belief that the only way we can be happy is if we're prosperous. The only thing that we can't, there has to be another way. And there has to be balance there, because we need the multinationals. We need them. We absolutely need them. We need money. We need economics to run a country. We need that. They're the cogs that run the machine. But I would argue if we were investing far more in preventative healthcare, for example, we'd be saving ourselves billions and billions and billions of euros at the other end of health. But we just don't do it because it's not a quick win. It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, I think how we govern, the way we govern, change is virtually impossible.
And as a core element of that, like in government, you're only in for a couple of years. Like, is it the lack of that long-term thinking? Like, let's think.
Well, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have been in power since the dawn of day. Like, so it to me, it's a mindset. It's a It's a political ideology. That's how we form. And now we see, like, you know, Labour are a good example. My family would have been probably historically Labour. Dad was in the army. You know, and they kind of were seen to have sacrificed their values for power during austerity. And I actually agree. We're seeing in the UK now, the Labour Party, who are they're the Tory B team. That's what they are. They're not honouring Labour values in any shape or form. They're actually going after what Maggie Thatcher went after. Keir Starmer, that's what he's doing. So people are getting pissed off now. And then I think parties like the Social Democrats in Ireland, I think they have a chance. I think because of their ideology. But even if they did get into power, it's going to take a long time to actually change this, because what happens then is our government tell you that if you vote for this person, all the multinationals are going to leave. It's called what they call capitalist realism. So this is what Mark Fisher talked about, capitalist realism. We've convinced people that there is no alternative to neoliberalism. There's no other way. That's a nonsense. It is an absolute nonsense. Gary Stevenson's doing amazing work around taxing billionaires. You know, there should never be billionaires in the country.
There shouldn't be a billionaires. It's bonkers.
Bonkers. And I'll finish in this one. They were dropping bombs in Iran for whatever reason that were half a billion euro each. I don't know how many they dropped. Think about the social issues that could be solved in America with one of those missiles.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in. And I think to change things, my honest opinion, we need a political revolution. And a revolution isn't lads on horseback coming in with swords. And a revolution is a way of thinking. What are we going to accept anymore? What do we want for ourselves? What is a societal value system?
That's the key. That's the key right there. What's the societal value system? And I remember hearing something recently. It was like, if you look at indigenous tribes and stuff, and it's going back to the tribes, like there's this evolutionary mismatch where we live in a world that isn't evolved to fit our biological needs. And if you look at tribes from years ago, what was important? Safety, community, food, housing. These are the most important things for everybody. But now it's just so big that there's so much stuff in the way. I think we just have to peel it back to basics, but a societal value system that's fundamentally grounded in the basics first.
Yeah, and how do we get to that value system? Because what we've done now in society as well, I know I'm talking a lot about theory, but I think it's quite important. Like Karl Marx's theory, conflict theory was between the upper classes and the working classes. That was the conflict for resource. Now what's happened is the conflict is between the working classes. We conflict with the immigrants. We're seeing this huge conflict and we're all turning on each other while the billionaires are going, sweet. Why do you think billionaires are funding far-right parties? Because they're turning that group on. We're turning on each other. We're not coming together. And what's happening is we're completely distracted. We don't see that, Jeff, that the world is this. It's this, we're not looking at that anymore. We're looking at this. That's where all the noise is. So I think what's really important as well when you talk societal values, it's like, what do we stand for? What do we want? Who? And I don't like the word enemy because it's a profound word, but Rage Against the Machine had a really incredible song called Know Your Enemy. And your enemy doesn't mean someone you have to fight. Your enemy is not the person you think it is. And that's the issue, and I think this is the stuff you learn when you're trying to understand how change happens and you're frustrated. A good example is that Ireland signed the United Nations Charter of the Right of the Child in 1992. Every child in Ireland has the highest attainable right to physical and mental health. We've breached it every year since, legally. We've like CAM systems where children are put on medication unmonitored, where they've psychiatrists diagnosing children in Kerry over Zoom from Dubai. Unmonitored clinical governance, where we have the Mental Health Commission says a root and branch change. We need to start again. This is absolutely brutal. We have kids not getting able to get spinal surgery where their spines are in right angles for 8 years. Will affect them for the rest of their life. You know, we have kids waiting for autism assessments who can't make sense of their world and are overwhelmed by it, but we can't give them resources because they haven't got a diagnosis, so we can't resource them, and the school can't be. And we are completely consistently breaching that United Nations right of the child. And there's you know Manic Street Preachers. If you tolerate this, your children will be next. And this is what we got to look at. So people go, "Oh, it doesn't affect me." I tell you one thing: when it does affect you, you'll realize how difficult it really is to be a mother or father in this country, feeling helpless because they can't help their child in the wealthiest country in Europe. That is ideology. That is policy. That is not. That is what we got to change. That is the thing. And ask yourself the question: do you think it's working? Just because you might have a few quid in your pocket. And we are like me, moved to a moment of self-preservation. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. My family are okay. And I get that. We've had a rough couple of years, so I totally get the psychology behind, I'm okay. And that's not how community and culture work. We have to take care of each other. We have to, like, whether you like it or not. So I think, ask yourself, anyone listening to this, do you think it's working like this?
Yeah. It's a really powerful way to leave the podcast, Bressie. And there's something that really landed with me as well, though, is like we're the richest in Europe, but we're the loneliest in Europe. Like there is such a disconnection there. And I'm very politically naive, and purposefully in a way, because it frustrates me. So I says, no, I'm just not going to get political. I have it around with my partner all the time. I'd say it's a game that doesn't work, so I'm not going to play in a game that doesn't work. And it's not.
And you have history of your own mental health. You know what you can take on and what you feel might overwhelm you.
That's true as well. And but one thing I heard, it was Eckhart Tolle of all people. He says, like, there's a consciousness grown on the planet where people are sort of waking up. They're being more kind, they're being more empathetic, but at the same time the ego is getting stronger and there's more billionaires than ever.
Why though? Individualism.
Yeah, individualism.
Neoliberalism.
What's going to win? I think there's a collision going on. What's going to win? That's
I don't think the ego is. I think we're convincing ourselves that the ego is. We're pretending that it is. We're performing that it is, and that's making it worse because underneath it all there's an insecurity.
Yeah.
And when you're really insecure, what do you tend to do? You nearly act out more and become more egotistical. And I think these are the things I start to realize. And remember, one thing that's really important: Krishnamurti, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Yeah.
This podcast is about change. In Buddhism, at the root of mindfulness is the only guarantee in life is impermanence. Everything changes. So we can talk about things not changing. They will change. We have to ask the question, when will they change? As individuals, the realize that's really important is because in mindfulness we say, the sadness is fleeting. It will dissipate. So will the happiness. So don't hold on to any of it too tightly. Just let it come and go. And that's impermanence. That's change. That's what I learned in mindfulness. Is when the bad, as Marty Mulligan, my good friend, will always say, "This will pass, Niall. This will pass," and it does. And as I said, you can't hold on to happiness because happiness is fleeting. It's impermanent. It changes. And I think societally, like, without being sounding like I'm rehashing a song, change is coming. I believe that. I think we've never been closer to understanding that the world has become ungovernable in the way it works now. And what we've seen now is that the guys we always believed were the good guys, the West, we're starting to realize they ain't the good guys.
No.
I don't think there are any good guys in this ideology. And that's the thing. And that's the point. But I think Ireland can be. I think Ireland, we need to come back to ourselves a little bit, our history, how we went from famines to independence to civil war to poverty. We've been through a lot. We've been very, very, it's been very challenging for our society and our country, and we've come through it. And I think we've got to use all of that. And all of that, like an individual would use that. As a society, we've got to use it. And we got to ask ourselves, what got us through back then? Because it's the same shit that'll get us through now. What got us through back then was, maybe civil war was a bad example, but was community. It was connection. It was, even in the poorest of times, we were taking an eye out for each other. And now we've created a modern culture that has left that behind. So we got to go back to that. What does that look like? Some of that requires people having some serious conversations with themselves when they throw hate at people, thinking that they're the problem. And I think the problem is our economic ideology. I've said this for 10 years now, and I believe it more now than I believed it 10 years ago. We got to change that. We got to believe that wealth and prosperity and growth at all costs is not the answer. It's important to have money and to have a functioning economy, but it's more important for me to have a functioning community. And I think that's something we got to think about.
I love that. And talking about change with yourself, like you've been through so many changes in your own life. When does the PhD finish? When does the results come out? When are you publishing? When's all that
Jesus Christ.
kick in?
Same thing. I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's the point. And you embrace that.
Yeah.
You embrace that kind of weirdness.
That uncertainty.
People are like, when is it done? When are you done? I have no idea. I don't know if I will finish.
Right.
These are just the realities of it.
It's such a monster as well.
It's a challenging thing.
Yeah.
And it's challenging because it occupies your headspace. I'm putting music out. I stepped back from the podcast. I found it difficult at the end, to be honest. But I have a lot going on. I've books and all of this stuff. But above all, I think I'm really passionate about the change. I think it can happen. I want to leave people with that.
Yeah.
Don't think anything I've said here is impossible. It is not.
It's possible.
It is absolutely possible. But we gotta change the lens on how we view it, and we gotta stop thinking that the promises made in election cycles can never be solved. If we continue doing this, I don't listen to them anymore. They don't make sense. I don't think our housing minister is not trying. It's like trying to pull something. It's like Damien Brown, when he was rowing across the Atlantic, he said he'd row for 3 miles and then the tide would take him back 5 miles. That's what we're doing. And it's on the public dime. So if you're paying tax, know that I don't think it's an effective way of spending our money. I think our more effective way is to create a more social, democratic society, a third way. And a lot of people go, Jesus, he's banging on about economics. Because economics is closely aligned to psychology. And back to Mark Fisher, the ultimate of any ideology is invisibility. So we got to make neoliberalism visible now. We've got to show what it's done. We got to show why it doesn't work. And same thing, energy crisis, energy companies record profits. Health crisis, health companies record profits. Housing crisis, housing companies record profits. It's rigged.
As you said before we chatted, it's not a health system, it's a sick system. And I love that. But the fact just says change is possible. That's very hard for me.
It is. And it's just going to take, we got to tap into what makes Ireland great. And what makes us great is that we believe in fairness. I fundamentally believe that. The best people in the world. I'm telling you. You say, what, in Europe, Ireland, what's good about it? We're wealthy. We're good people. Go back to that. Come back to that. And you won't see that on Twitter. You will not see that on Instagram or LinkedIn. You'll see it in your community. That's where it is. Go into them, meet them. Don't get me wrong. You're always going to meet people you don't like in your community. We've all different personality types. But, to me, that's where it's at. That's what we got to come back to.
Yeah. And something you said, it was like a mantra of Lust for Life one time as well. And it really comes down to that. Just be sound.
Yeah.
Just be sound. Don't be a dick. And if everyone just sort of had that mantra at the start of their day, just try to be sound, try to be nice to other people, don't be a dick. Imagine the world,
That's my stat, is 99% of people on planet Earth are sound, but for some reason we only ever hear about the 1% of ourselves all the time. And that's when social media's currency is division, that's all you're going to see. You ain't going to see the good guys doing good things out there. You're not going to see them because it doesn't get clicks. They're out there though. Trust me.
It's very heartening. I absolutely love this conversation, Bressie, really did. Is there anything you want to finish with that we haven't discussed?
No, just please don't see anything I've said as a negative thing. It's not. It's now we got to wake up. We got to wake up.
Yeah, and change.
When we wake up, we can do it. Yeah, you can. Yeah. And it's just back to the thing. The only time I've ever changed is when I understood what the fuck I stood for.
Yeah.
So, as a country, I think it's time to have that conversation now.
Check our values. Lovely stuff. Pleasure, Bressie. Thank you. Man.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoy this content, I've created a range of online courses around mindset, mastering your self-talk, unlocking the secrets of addiction recovery and morning routines, and many, many more. If you're interested, simply click on the link in the show notes and use the word resilience to get free access to all of that content.